This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi Sai. Freilich and Isru Chag. So today is going to be part 2 in the series of the mystery of the Sambatyon and finding the 10 lost tribes. We mentioned something interesting from the Arzarua, Rabbi Yitzchak Mivina, who brings down a dimension of the Sambatyon that could actually have halachic ramifications, and that is, we say in the Zmiros of Shabbos, and we saw in the Gemara in Sanhedrin on Daf Samach Hamid Beis, as well as in many Midrashim, as well as Menashe and Israel mentioning that there were people over the years who had containers of the sand of the Sambatyon, that during the week the Sambatyon was volatile. Well, this may make a nafkaminas lahalacha, because we know there's the well-known shaila whether you put on tefillin on Chalamoid or not. Well, now we would have a conclusive way of figuring out whether, in fact, you should wear tefillin or not. All you need to do is go to the Sambatyon. If it's volatile, then you know you need to put tefillin on. And if it rests, then you shouldn't wear tefillin. So this journey and this adventure could actually spell ramifications, halacha l'maisa. So now let me tell you about something quite amazing. And that is one of the original reporters of the Sambatyon after the times of the Gemara and the Midrash was a fascinating figure, a 9th century traveler whose name was Eldar Hadani. Eldar Hadani. And Eldar came and he made various travels. He actually had 2 famous travels. He traveled 2 times. The first time he went to Egypt, and then he crossed the Ethiopian River in the year 880. He was then in Babel. From there he went to Barbaria, Africa, North Africa, and his travels and his reports created quite a stir. Some question the validity of his reports. Some say they were complete fabrications. But as we're going to see, many of the Rishonim took him very seriously, including the Balei HaTosfos. And surprisingly, there are Tosfos and Shas that quote him, and you wouldn't even know it. And that's what we're going to get involved in a little bit. Now, this Eldar Hadani claimed that he was a miyuchas, going back all the way to none other than Dan. So, for example, if you turn over to page 4, all the way at the end of this Maramakoim, he says, V'zeh Shemi, Eldar ben Machli, ben Yechezkel, ben Chizkiah, ben Oluk, ben Avner, ben Shmayahu, ben Chasar, ben Chur, ben Elkanah, ben Hillel, ben Tuvia, ben Pedas, ben Einon, ben Naaman, ben Toam, ben Tami, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, ben Shalem, ben Eliyahu, ben Eliyav, ben Achisamach, ben Chushim, ben Dan, ben Yaakov Avinu, Olav Shalom. So he claimed direct descent from Dan. We're talking 9th century. Now, he came with some of the most fantastic, unbelievable, in every sense of the word, reports. So let's read some of his reports. But not only reports, he came back with halachas. But what's interesting about his halachas, where he claimed to be from Shevet Dan, he claimed to know, maybe we'll close the... He claimed to be from Shevet Dan, and he claimed to know the whereabouts of Shevet Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And he came back with halachic reports. Now, amazingly, let's take a look on page 2, the left-hand column on the 3rd paragraph. He had a version of Shas, but his Shas was different than our Shas, very different, because we're talking about 4 Shvatim that were exiled 130 years before Churban Bayis Rishon. That means wherever they were exiled to, they didn't know about no Purim, no Chanukah. They didn't know about any Tanoim. Forget Tanoim, no Amorim. They didn't know about Anshe Knesset HaGdolah.
Why were they exiled?
They were exiled by the Melech Ashur 130 years before with the Aseret HaShvatim.
Just them?
But these 4, all the Aseret HaShvatim, but he was aware of the whereabouts of 4 of them, and their Talmud, all it said in their Talmud was, Amar Yehoshua ben Nun Mishmei de Moshe. Forget about Daniel, forget about Mordechai, forget about Ezra HaSofer, of course no Rabbi Akiva, Rav Tarfon, Gamliel, Rav Lazar, Rav Meir, there's no Tanum, there was no Torah Shabbat Peh. And some of the halachas that are reported, if you would have brought them to me, I would have said, what? And I wouldn't even deal with that, I wouldn't even use it. I wouldn't even feel the need to argue on it. And yet we're going to see Eldar Hadani wrote a sefer called Hilchos Eretz Yisrael, which is quoted in many Tosfos and Shas. So, for example, in the left-hand column, on the third paragraph, Ha-Talmud shalahem b'lashon ha-kodesh mitzuchtzach. Their Talmud was very fine Hebrew. Ve'enoi mazkir b'shum chacham. No rabbis mentioned. Lo mibalei Mishnah, v'lo mibalei Talmud. Elekach oimer b'chol halacha. This is what he said by every halacha. Kach lamadnu mipi Yehoshua mipi Moshe mipi Hagvura. So we learned from Yoshua, from Moshe, from Hashem. And we're going to see some of the fantastic halachas that he said. So if take a look in the middle column, second paragraph. Now, basically, when his reports came, the Jews were very incredulous. They did not believe some of the things he said, and they brought the Shaila to Rav Tzemach Goin, one of the early Goinim. Say, who is this guy? Do we need to accept what he says? Do we believe him? Is he? Do we need to excommunicate him? How do we deal with him? So they write to Rav Tzemach Goin, Noidia ladoinenu ki nisarach beinenu adam echad. A certain person has become a guest among us. Ushmai Eldar Hadani mishevet Dan. V'sipar lanu, he tells us ki arba shvatim him b'makom echad. There are 4 tribes in one place: Dan, V'Naftali, Gad, V'Asher. And where did they go to? Sham Shem Hamakom Chavila Hakaduma. The early Chavila is mentioned in Bereshis. What does it say in Bereshis about Chavila? B'Sham Hazav, Asher Sham Hazav. And they even have a shofet. The shofet of Chavila is Avadon. And you know what they do over there? V'danin ba'arba misos bezdin. They judge the 4 skila, sreifa, hereg, and chenek. And v'yoshvim ba'ahalim, they sit in tents. V'noisim, they travel. V'choinim yimakim l'makim, and they fight. They fight with their enemies, not with each other. They fight with their enemies. Listen to this. Yeah, they fight with Ethiopian kings. And he goes on to describe exactly what type of wars they wage and what kind of, who fights the wars and how people would fight for 3 months, and then when they're done, other people will take them over. A whole description. I don't want to get into that. Look at the next paragraph. Yesh lahem hamikra kula. They have all of Chumash. But they ain't covered in Megillah, Mimaisa Esther. They don't lay in Megillah. Kilai hayu boise hanes. Yeah, they were not part of that miracle. V'loi Megillas Eicha. They don't lay in Eicha. Why?
Excuse me.
1 second. They don't lay in Eicha. Kedei shaloi l'shaber slibam. It would be too depressing for them. They don't lay in Eicha. V'chol Talmud shalahem. And their whole body of law, Ein Shem Shum Chacham. There is no sage. Ela Amar Yehoshua Mipi Moshe Mipi Hagamara. Now listen to this. Very quickly.
He says that they fought with the Malchei Kush.
Yeah.
And Achashverosh was Mehodu Viat Kush. So why weren't they included in the nace?
No, Achashverosh never got to pass the Sambatyon. That's what it says. Now listen to this. Next column, 3rd paragraph. V'oid sipar lanu. This is what he told us. Kishachara beis hamikdash. Alu Yisrael Bavel. The Jews went up to Bavel. Yeah? So far so good. Amdu HaKazdim al b'nei Moshe. The Chasm then went to the sons of Moshe. Now who are the b'nei Moshe? Exactly, the Levium. Amru lahem. And the Chasm, who are the Chasm? The Chaldeans, the Babylonians. They said, Shiru lahanu mishir. Right? Sing for us the songs of Zion. Amdu b'nei Moshe v'go b'vchil. They started to cry l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'kitzu etzvoiseim b'shineim loimar. They shattered. They cut off their thumbs. They said, "Oh, it's the fingers that played when the Beis Hamikdash said, we're gonna play." What did they say? What were the words? Heich nashir. Right? Ha'eich nashir shir Hashem alad mas nechar. Fine. So far, I'm good. But then this really blew me away. Uba ha'anon, but then a cloud came along. V'nasam, and carried them. Ima haleim, with their tents. V'tzainam, uvakaram, v'haylicham, lechavila, v'haridam sham b'layla. A cloud came along and deposited the Levites on the other side of the Sambatyon. Now, again, he said, who's on the other side? Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Hersta Maisa. Now, the first part of the story everybody knows. It's a parak in Tehillim. But now he's saying, a cloud came along, lifted up all the Leviim, and deposited them in Chavila. Now, you know, you have Gemaras and Shas, that when Ezra wanted to come back to Bayis Sheni, he looked for the Leviim and he couldn't find them, so he knas them. Well, now we know why they didn't come back. They couldn't get out. They couldn't cross the Sambatyon. They were gone.
They obviously reappeared. On Yehuda we knew, but if they were with all the other Shratim, how do they appear today?
I don't know.
We don't know anybody or anybody else.
I don't know, but this put me over the top. I mean, here you have this guy coming, and I'm a big skeptic when it comes to stories. Somebody once told me that he heard from Victor Miller, 90% of stories are not true. And even this story that I'm telling you that someone told me, it's also, he didn't tell me either.
And you love stories?
No.
How do you
I don't like
you're a
stories.
skeptic?
I don't like stories. I don't, since I'm a
Philosophy.
kid, I do not pay attention to stories. Anytime, ask me something my Rabbi taught me, I'll remember. A story, I tune out. I don't accept stories. No, Gemara is not a story. Gemara is a Misinai. This is a Maisa. And now the first part of the Maisa, I get. But it's a parak in Tehillim. But now Eldar Hadani is saying that a cloud came along and deposited the Leviim in Chavila. I don't know. But we're going to see. He didn't stop there. He told us, our forefathers said, there was a big earthquake also. And that morning they saw a great army. And the army came along and they took the river. They diverted the river. That rolls on stones, and sand. That an army came along and took this Sambatyon that wasn't there and put it there. In other words, the cloud deposited the Bnei Moshe, and then an army came and sort of barricaded them with a river that shot stones. This is all part of his report. Yeah. And from that time on, and that river, Adayin Goylel Avanim V'chol Bli Mayim, is still shooting rocks and stones.
With no water.
No water. No water. Of course, no water. No. The army did not put water there. And that river shoots stones for 6 days a week and rests on Shabbos. And when Shabbos comes, the cloud descends, and you can't approach it until Matzah Shabbos. And guess what the name of the river is? You got it. Sambatyon. We call it Sabatino. Some places in that river are only 60 amos wide. And they sit on one side, and we sit on the other side, and we talk to each other across the river. And over there are no wild animals, and there are no bad behemoths, and there are no mosquitoes, and it's just a good place to be.
Who's talking on what side?
Which side? Who's talking to who? Who are they?
I guess on the other side of the Sambatyon. It's just a really pleasant place. So if you want to plan a vacation,
Sambatyon tours.
Sambatyon tours, right? You heard it here first. Okay.
It's in North Africa. That's where he said it was.
I don't know. Now listen to this. In the first version of the stories of Eldar Hadani, when this question was posed to Rav Tzemach Goin, Rav Tzemach Goin says like this: what's the problem? What exactly do you have a hard time believing? He says. I mean, if you would have brought this to me, I would have said, I don't know what you're talking about. No, Rav Tzemach Goin says, he says on the fourth paragraph on the third sheet, V'chi b'nei Moshe etzlam, V'nahar Sambatyon makaf aleim. He claims the Bnei Moshe are there, and the Sambatyon surrounds him. Amar Emes! It's the truth. I'm on page 3, the first column, the third paragraph that begins V'chi Bnei Moshe. Yeah? V'chi Bnei Moshe etzlam. V'nahar Sambatyon makaf aleim. Emes Amar. He's saying the truth. Shekach oimrim Chazal b'medrash. Chazal say this in a medrash. Shehigla Nebuchadnezzar Leviim b'nei Moshe Shishim Riboy. That Nebuchadnezzar exiled 600,000 Leviim. V'kivan she'igil l'naris Bavel. Heim v'chinarem ir lahem k'mo shesiper lachem Rav Eldad. Exactly like Rav Eldad says. Azoy, that's what happened. I'm thinking to myself, what do you mean that's what happened? The medrash says all the Medrash says is they bit off their thumbs. Well, what's this thing with the cloud depositing them on the other side of the Sambatyon? But Reb Tzemach Goin says, exactly as Rav Eldad said, Kachava. So we have to say, where did he get this from? Look in the paragraph that begins, Autism. Autism al ashinoi v'hachilav asher shamatim pi Eldad. Don't wonder about the differences and the discrepancies that you hear from him. The Babylonian scholars, the scholars of Israel, they learn the same Mishnah, and they argue on each other. And they don't take away what it says in the Mishnah. So it's not a question why Eldad has different halachos than you're used to. Different chachamim are going to derive at different conclusions. But some of the things he says are a little bit far out there. Yesh loymar, he says in the middle of the paragraph, she'enoi klau rachaik, she'eldad zeh shagag v'hichlif meiroiv tzaroisav she'avru alav v'toyrach haderach hama'ane gufa adam. Either certain things that are a little off. Look, you try traveling through Ethiopia in the blazing sun. We'll see how confused you get.
His mind was a little bit affected by heat stroke.
Yeah, so obviously he's a legitimate source, and his stories are true, and his halachas are true. A couple of things, look, he was probably very thirsty, he was very hot, and his mind was slightly affected by the travails of travel. So maybe that's why there's some discrepancies. But everything he says is basically emes la'amitai. So that was a little bit shocking to me that he would give him such legitimacy. But maybe even more surprising is the fact that Kemat, all the Rishonim quote him. Really? Where? Take a look at number 15.
Tzemach Hagon is a reputable source.
Yeah, he's one of the Gaonim. One of the Gaonim. The first Tosfos in Masechta Chulin. Tosfos says, Hakol Shochten. Everyone's allowed to shecht. Everyone. I mean, everyone, it means everyone, right? Doesn't everyone mean everyone? Everyone, l'chayra, means men, women, children. Are women allowed to shecht? Kasav behilchos Eretz Yisrael. It's written in the laws, in the book called Laws of Eretz Yisrael, Dinashim lo yishchatu, that women cannot shecht, mipnei shedaton kalos, because their mind are
easy,
weak. But we'll translate it in a more delicate way. Kalos could mean
easy,
correct,
quick,
light,
like kal kanesher, light, swift. You know, we're not as quick as them, so we could be more deliberate. But in any event, it says in the Hilchos Eretz Yisrael that women cannot shecht. Rabbi say, what in the world is Hilchos?
She's not in there.
That's safer,
right?
What in the world is Hilchos Eretz Yisrael? Well, comes the Chida in the Shem Hagadolim in Ma'areches Hey Oy Samach Hilchos Eretz Yisrael Shemaskirim HaTosis number 14 V'Harash Reish Chulin Heim Hilchos Shechiber Chacham Echad Medinim Sha'amar Eldar Hadani. Hilchos Eretz Yisrael are the halachos that a certain sage wrote from the halachos that were taught by none other than good old Eldar Hadani Shaba Me'aseres Hashvatim B'mei HaGa'onim. He came from the 10 tribes in the times of the Goinim. I'll tell you a little story. In 1910,
Stories?
1910, my stories are true, right?
It's a 10%. He didn't say.
In 1910, a man appeared dressed like a Bedouin, and he comes to an Arab. He says, "Take me to the Jews." So the Arab goes, "Go to Petach Tikva." He goes to Petach Tikva. He comes right back to the Arab. He says, "There are no Jews here. Everyone here is Christians." Arab said, "What are you talking about? You have to speak to them b'lashon hakodesh." So he speaks to them b'lashon hakodesh. He realizes they're Jews. They asked him, "Why do you think they were Christians?" He said, "I never saw a Jew without a beard before. I figured they must have been Noitzrim." Nobody knows who this guy is. They say, "Where do you come from?" It's 1910. I can't say, "I got lost in my travels." He said, "Where could I go to learn Kabbalah?" They took him to Yeshiva Shar HaShamayim. Now, Yeshiva Shar HaShamayim was founded by two Goinim. One was Rev Shimon Tzvi Horowitz, and the other was the father of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. They were the founders of the great Kabbalah Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, Yeshiva Shar HaShamayim. One of their first Talmidim was Tzvi Pesach Frank, and they took this man to the yeshiva, and it was determined that he was from the Aseres HaShvatim, who had traveled and got lost. He made it back from wherever he was originated from, and he told them that he came to hasten the Geula. He spent the rest of his life davening at various kvarim and learning Kabbalah. 1910. But we're going to see a little bit before that what happened. So now here we have Hilchos Eretz Yisrael quoted by Tosfos. Now, the Eldar Hadani paskind that women cannot shacht. Do we follow that halacha? No. We paskind women could shacht. Okay? Ve'einira. Da'afilu, Tosfos says, they're even allowed to shacht kachim. Da'afilu b'mukdashim shechtos l'chadchila. K'daminon para kol hapsulim. Kol hapsulim sheshachtu di'avedin l'chadchila loy. By kachim it says that anyone who's possible to shacht is only b'di'avad. And the Gemara asks, but we know they're allowed to shacht l'chadchila. And the Gemara says, taka, they're allowed to shacht l'chadchila. So Tosfos quotes the Sefer of Eldar Hadani, and he argues on it. Now you tell me, if Eldar Hadani's halachas have no authenticity and no basis, you think Tosfos would quote it? You think Tosfos would say, "Oh, it says in Hilchos Arazil this and this, and I feel like that"? But Tosfos would never say, "I read in the comic book says like this, and I say there's no such thing as Superman. Superman never existed." Right? Of course not. Tosfos is not quoting nonsensical sources. The fact that he quotes Hilchos Eretz Yisrael and argues on it means that he gives it a certain degree of credence.
But Tosfos doesn't mention Eldar Hadani. He just quotes the Sefer, right?
Correct. Now, Eldar Hadani did not write the Sefer Hilchos Eretz Yisrael. The Chidah says, Chacham Echad Midinim She'amar Eldar Hadani.
Because the title Hilchos Eretz Yisrael is a very generic title. That, could Svarim about the halachos of Eretz Yisrael could have been written by many of the Talmud.
Let's.
Maybe it was more than one sefer called Hilchos Eretz Yisrael.
Well, first of all, you have the Chidah. The Chidah is telling you that the Sefer Hilchos Eretz Yisrael that's mentioned in Tosfos in the beginning of Chulin are for the halachas that Eldar Hadani took. But we'll see in other Rishonim where they say explicitly that this is a sefer from Eldar Hadani. For example, the Mordechai. Look at number 16. The Mordechai, in the beginning of Chulin, on the words Hakol Sheichtin, Nere Hadulay Tani Hacha Echad Anoshim V'Echad Anoshim Mishum the Milsa the Pshita Hi the Ishak She'er L'Shchait. Because it's obvious they could shecht. But then look what he writes on the third line. Kasav Rabbeinu Baruch Ra'isi Kasav B'Hilchos Shchita Shehevi Hu Rabbi Eldar ben Machli Haba Me'aseres HaShvatim. So here we have black and white that this is the halachos of shchita that were brought from Rabbi Eldar Hadani, that Yeshua said, Amar Yeshua mipi Moshe mipi Hagvura kol hazaveach l'Hashem, anyone who slaughters to God ve'eni yodeh hilchos shchita aser. If you shecht and you don't know the halachas, it's aser to eat. And then you know what else Yeshua ben Nun said? If a tabach shechs ena haguna, whether a behema, whether a chaya, whether an oif, it's pigul. And you can't shecht until you daven first. And if you don't make a bracha on the shechita, it's pigul. And if you're not wearing clothing, it's pigul. And if you're a shikr, it's pigul. And if you're not wearing a yarmulke, it's pigul. And if you're soiled with shikva zera, it's pigul. An ovel that shechs, it's pigul. A woman who shechs, an old man who shechs, no, you can't eat it. Says the Mordechai, what do I have to say about these halachas of Eldar Hadani? Chumra ba'almahu v'loy nahaginon kivaseh. It's a chumrah, we're not noyeg like that. Now, would a Rishon ever quote, I was in a nursery school, and I heard some kids talking, and they said, you're not allowed to eat jelly beans on Tuesdays. Says Toysus, I disagree, that's just a chumrah ba'alma, but we're not noyeg like that. Obviously not. But the fact that Toysus, the Mordechai is quoting the halachas of Eldar Hadani and saying, it's stam a chumrah, we're not noyeg that way, means that it's somewhat credible, but it's something that we don't follow. So the fact that all these Rishonim cite it means that it has some significance. Even the Vilna Gaon, in his commentary to the Siddur, the Avnei Eliyahu on the bracha, Tika b'shofar gadol, even the Vilna Gaon comments, this bracha has 3 tefillos in it. Tika b'shofar gadol l'cheiruseinu. B'san is the kabetz kol yoseinu. B'kabetzeinu yachad me'arkan pasar. So you have 3 parts. So who are these 3 parts referring to? Says the Gaon, Mibnei sheshloisha galuyos galu Yisrael. There have been 3 exiles. Echad, 1 exile, acharei harei choshech, behind the dark mountains. V'echad me'ever l'nahar Sambatyon, 1 on the other side of the Sambatyon. Ve'echad nidchu b'arba kanfei saras, and the other one were scattered to the 4 ends of the world. So who is but in the dark mountains? Who's on the other side of the Sambatyon? And who are on the 4 sides of the world? Aseres hashvatim galu acharei harei choshech. The 10 tribes, they are behind the mountains of darkness. Ume'ever lanar, and on the other side of the river. Because they were exiled hundreds of years before, Yesham Cheros, they are free for hundreds of years, and they have kings. And when Mashiach comes, first the Aseres Hashvatim will be redeemed, and only then Yehuda and Yamin. How do I know? It says like this: Uvo ha'ivdim b'eretz Ashur. First, those who are exiled by Ashur will be redeemed. V'hanidachim, and those who are cast away by Eretz Mitzrayim, everywhere else, then they will come v'shachvul Hashem harakodesh. And says the Gaon, this is the meaning of Tika b'shofar gadol. Tika b'shofar gadol l'cheiruseinu. Those are the ones who are behind the mountains of darkness. They have cheros. Tika b'shofar gadol l'cheiruseinu. V'sanes the kabetz kol yoseinu are those on the other side of the Sambatyon. By the way, says the Gaon, you know which river the Sambatyon is? The Ganges.
It's in India.
A water river.
What?
A water river.
How do you know?
See pictures.
Big river.
See pictures of
It's a huge river.
cows in it, people bathing, with a lot of things in it.
It's a big polluted river.
Right.
It's in India.
For example, B'eretz Surmati Vachen. What?
Matra?
Okay, and V'kabetzenu Yachem Me'arba Kanfei Sa'aretz is Yehuda ben Yamin. Okay, so interestingly, the Gra writes that the Golos of the Aseres Hashvatim in Micha is referred to the Tzila. The Tzila are the crippled ones. Why are the Aseres Hashvatim called the crippled ones? Because we have 2 legs to stand on. What are the 2 legs we stand on? Tar Shavachsav, Tar Shavapeh. These guys, they only stand on 1 leg. Therefore they're crippled. They don't have the Tar Shavapeh. So we see that the Sefer Eldar Hadani is reckoned with However, on the other hand, not everybody is so favorable toward the Sefer Eldar Hadani. For example, and if you would have asked me, if I had to guess who would be more skeptical of the Sefer Eldar Hadani, I would probably guess the Ibn Ezra. And in fact, the Ibn Ezra says that we do not have to accept anything reported in the Sefer Eldar Hadani. Look at number 18. It says the Ibn Ezra, Ki Amar Moshe, that who did Moshe marry? V'zois Tzipora hi ha'isha ha'kushas asher Amar. Moshe married Tzipora, the Isha Kushas. That says differently in a book called Divrei Hayamim de Moshe. Says the Ibn Ezra, don't believe that book. Uklal oimer lecha. Let me tell you the following. Kol sefer shaloi kasvu neviim chachamim mipi hakabbalah ein lismay chalav. Any book that the prophets did not write and the chachamim did not write from tradition, do not rely on it. V'yav ki yesh bo dvarim shemakchishim adas hanachayna. Especially because there are things in here, in these books, that insult the intellect. For example, Sefer Zerubbabel. Anyone here ever hear of Sefer Zerubbabel? Never heard of it. Vegam Sefer Eldar Hadani. Also, the book Eldar Hadani, you do not have to rely on it. It is not compelling. So Ibn Ezra does not reckon with that book.
When was the Ibn Ezra? Before or after the Gonim?
After the Gonim.
So he
Now,
doesn't cite the fact that somebody Hagolim, for example, who's somebody you normally think you could rely on, supportive of.
Look, Reb Tzemach Gaon didn't say we paskin like Eldar Hadani.
He's accepting some of his halakha.
He just said, you don't have to throw him out of town, and you don't have to excommunicate him, and you don't have to think of him as a heretic or a disbeliever. But Ibn Ezra is just saying you don't have. Now, I'll take it the other way. Will Ibn Ezra ever write about some kind of nonsensical book? This book.
There must have been some
Don't rely on this book. It's not. Obviously, the fact that he even entertains the possibility.
People relying on it, so he wants.
And it must have. It must
some credibility.
Right. It must have some significance, but not to rely on as a Torah source. By the way, the Marami Rutenberg also writes about the Eldar Hadani that some of the things he wrote, Leloi Davar Kasvu, were written for naught. Is Shas Maram Ben Baruch number 19. But let me tell you one thing, and this really sort of shocked me, and that is the story that Eldar Hadani reported about the Levium. I mean, that really bothered me, because everybody knows the Levium bit off their thumbs. But that a cloud came along and lifted them up, I mean, that sounds a little bit... especially anytime somebody wants to make up a story, you don't just make up a story out of the blue. It's always based on a true story, right? You take a story and that everybody knows, and then you just embellish it a little bit. But
then you also have the issue of Levium are here today. We know who they are. They would then be the only group, as far as we know, of the Aseret Shvatim plus the Levium that exists today. So how did they get back?
Well, those
Levium, if they were over with the other Shvatim,
the Levium that bit off their thumbs were the older Levium who used to play in the Beis HaMikdash. The younger Levium, they didn't bite off their thumbs. It happens to be the younger Levium.
They weren't picked up by the cloud?
They did not go back to Eretz Yisrael. They didn't want to, possibly not. But Rabbi Sai, where does this story come from? And lo and behold, there's a Targum Yonasan ben Uziel. Well, take a look at this. Targum Yonasan ben Uziel on the pasuk, Hinei anoichi kaireis bris neged kol amecha esen niflois asher lo yirau b'chol haaretz b'chol hagim v'ra chol ha'am asher tavekir b'hoi. On that pasuk, Targum Yonasan ben Uziel says, look at number 31. You ready, Rabbi Sai? Number 31. Va'amar ha'ana gizar kiyam, I decree to la ish lechif ama hadein be'ama ichron. You will not be exchanged. Beram minach yifkun oichloisen. From you will come populations, the tzadikin. Kevel kol amach abed perishan. Opposite all of your nation I will make a separation. When? Bisman dihavon b'shivyasa. When you are in captivity, al nar vayas bavel. Ve'asei lekinun mitamon. I'm going to remove you. I'm going to remove you from there. Ve'ishrinun min legav lenahar Sambatyon. And I'm going to put you on the other side of the Sambatyon. Uchehinun prishan. You will then be separated. Isbariu b'chol dariya. You're not mixed with the nations of the world. B'chol amamaya. V'yechavon kol amad da'an shari b'neiam b'yoyim ha'u. So here you have Targum Yonasan ben Uziel gives us the missing piece of information that we only knew from Eldar Hadani, that it wasn't only that they bit off their thumbs, but in fact somehow, miraculously, God elevated them and removed them and put the Levim on the other side of the Sambatyon.
All the Levim, even the ones that didn't bite off there, I mean...
But here, this seemingly incredulous story that Eldar Hadani seem to have invented. No, this is already well documented from Targum Yonasan ben Uziel that there was something supernatural that occurred to those Levim, that they were elevated and they were removed and they were taken to the other side of the Sambatyon. That's pretty.
Targum Yonasan?
That's pretty good confirmation.
One.
That
nobody else seems to buy it.
No, that's what Tzemach Goin said. That what happened to Levim is exactly as reported by Eldar Hadani. So that was very remarkable to me, that this story that seems so unbelievable is actually documented in Targum Yonasan ben Uziel. So Mirz Hashem, tomorrow we're going to learn about other sightings and reports from the other side of Sambatyon, and Mirz Hashem will learn what this has to do with the period of Akdamus. And even though this is after Shavuos, but it's certainly something very interesting. Okay, Rabbi, say have a great day.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.